Hi and welcome to the next episode of the Leadership Lab. This is a series of interviews where I speak to Taranaki's finest leaders. And today I'm joined by Paul Goodeve, who's the CEO of FirstGas and FirstGas. Welcome, Paul. So let's start off. Who are FirstGas, FirstGas? What do you do?
Well, I actually look after three companies.
Okay.
Actually, so we've got FirstGas, which is a retail LPG business, which is New Zealand's largest, and I'd argue best LPG distributor in New Zealand. We've got about 140,000 customers from Invercargill, probably actually Stewart Island in the south to the far north, and so that's our LPG retail business. We also run a company called FirstGas, which looks after New Zealand's gas storage facility, only gas storage facility at Aotearoa, which is just behind Stratford. And I always like to explain that that's a little asset buried in the back of Stratford that actually stores probably about as much energy in the ground as every single hydro dam all across New Zealand. If you add up all of the storage and all of the hydro dams in New Zealand, it's probably about the same as Aotearoa. And so that's buried in the back of Stratford. It's a great asset, really important strategic asset for New Zealand. And then we've got our FirstGas business, which has the distribution gas pipelines across some of the North Island and also runs gas transmission pipelines. It basically takes high pressure gas from New Plymouth and distributes that right across the North Island of New Zealand to some of our most important export industries. Fonterra, Methanex, companies that really make a difference.
So Paul, across the three companies, how many people do you employ locally?
So across New Zealand we have about 400 employees. Locally in New Plymouth we'd have maybe 150 in total. A lot of companies think of themselves as New Plymouth or Taranaki companies. We think of ourselves as a New Zealand company that chooses to be in Taranaki. And so we talk nationally, and we've got an office here in New Plymouth.
So your role CEO, a lot of people won't necessarily know what a CEO is. What do you do? What's your role? What's your function, responsibility?
So I guess probably in many ways the CEO role is the easiest role in the company. And I kind of think, if you sort of, maybe I read Jim Collins' book, so I kind of like this analogy, there's some holes in it along the way. But I think that the trick for me is to make sure I have the right people on the bus. So making sure, sort of in HR language, of talent acquisition. But my job is to make sure we have great people working for us and who want to work for us, and that everyone knows the map to where we're going. So that I might not be driving the bus, but whoever's driving the bus, in whatever context they're driving the bus, they know the way we're going. So my two roles are basically strategy, where we're going, and who we've got to help us get there.
So let's talk about this aspect of people, talent acquisition. How do you find the right people that are going to sit on the right seats, even on the right bus?
So I guess I'm not so worried about the seats on the bus.
Okay.
Personally, and maybe this is a bit different, but I don't worry about titles. And even sometimes I'm not actually probably as disciplined about position descriptions as I should be, because I actually think that a good team will work it out between themselves. And if you've got great people, they will work out the position descriptions or the things that they're best able to do, and then they will work on it together. And business is really fast moving, dynamic now. I think it's artificial, especially at sort of significant strategic and leadership roles, to draw boxes around what people do and say, here's your box, play in that box. Kate's going to play in this box. Don't get your boxes confused, because that's just not how life happens. I think what happens is everyone's in the sandpit together, and over time you work out that Kate's actually really good at digging holes and Ben's really good at putting posts in those holes. And it might take you a little while to work on that, and you'll say, oh, okay, today we're digging a hole and putting a post in it, and everyone works on the bits that are good for it, and then tomorrow you'll be doing something quite different.
So you or people within your team have got candidates in front of them. What is there, one or two characteristics that you're specifically looking for?
I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say this, but we don't have wankers. And I'm not sure if you're allowed to say that, but that's my primary thing. I want people who buy into what we're trying to do. And I want people who are energized by making a difference. And I just don't want jerks. And I don't know how you ask that or how you question that. I put a lot of store into references and the like, but that's what I'm after. I'm after people that have got a degree of curiosity, who believe in what we're doing and that it's important, and they're not jerks about it. And I mean, there's layers to that, and there are ways you try and question it, but they are the three things I'm looking for.
So you just said something there that really sparked my intrigue. Degree of curiosity. Just explain that a little bit more.
Also, like I said, business is dynamic and changing. Being really good at doing something now is not actually that useful for the future. It's like being the best typesetter was really important when typesetting was a thing. But and this is probably as a CEO, I'm looking beyond almost this year's performance. I'm thinking about 3, 5, 10 years performance. Having great typesetters is not that useful for what's going to happen next year or the year after. What I want is people who are good at a skill, and they can go, well, I'm a real good typesetter, but I know enough around the typesetting injuries, that's not going to last forever. And actually what I do know lots about is fonts, and maybe I need to get into this computer thing because that's where fonts are going to be and typesetting is going to go. So that's what I want, people who are like, here's how we do it now. What are the bits of what we do now that we're going to be useful in the future? How can we get better at that? How can we adapt the skills that we've got to what happens in the future? And there's a mindset of looking beyond what you do now and just looking out.
So how do you create the conditions for success around that forward thinking, that curiosity internally?
And one of the things that I've always been a real advocate for is being really open with people about where the business is going and what we're doing, and creating talking or speaking opportunities for people to hear from different voices. So pretty much all the organisations I've worked in, whether I've been the CEO or had some other role, I've always been really keen to get external speakers in to do what I've called 101s, or Zoom's great now. You get psychologists in sometimes to talk about things. Got an economist. At FirstGas today, we've got someone talking to our organisation about gender pay issues and things like that. So I think that the way you create that is you create an openness about the business, so people who work in your business appreciate what's happening, and then you give them a whole range of different views about how you can think about this in different ways. So I think it's about treating people as grown-ups and giving them the information so that they can apply their thinking in different ways.
As you reflect on your career, is there one book that's stood out for you that's really influenced you?
No, I would love to say there is, and I'm not a very widely read person. There are a few books that at different times have connected with me. I read a guy, Stephen Covey, wrote The 7 Habits and stuff like that, which I read. I didn't really like 7 Habits that much. It was not a book that resonated with me. But he wrote another book, which I think was a much less successful book, that was called First Things First. And I've always liked, there's a couple of bits I like about that book. And it uses the analogy of a cup, and if you put big stones in, you can get more around it and stuff like that. And I really like that, because one of the big things as you get more senior in an organisation is you can't do everything. And what you need to do is you need to make sure that you're putting the big rocks in first. And that, as you get further up in an organisation, I think that's the ultimate skill that people need to learn, is what is really the most important thing. Because there's so much you could do, you just have to focus on the most important things. So I really like that bit of his book. And he also had this thing that he called sharpening the saw, which is about, you can't just saw away all day and expect to be able to saw well the next day. So I really like the idea that you have to take a break, you have to improve, and that could be a break for work, it could be learning different ways of doing things, and then you can come back with a sharp saw. That's really, and then I spoke a little bit before about the guy Collins and Good to Great and things like that, which I really like. There's been a lot of writing that sort of say that maybe some of his companies didn't as successful in the long term as well. But I really like his idea about sort of getting good people on and promoting from within and things like that. So I like that as well. And they're the two books that have kind of connected with me at stages of my career where they were really made a difference.
So Paul, you mentioned this aspect of sharpening the saw.
Yeah.
I'd love for you to share with us, how do you sharpen the saw, and also how do you encourage members of the organisation to sharpen the saw?
Working is, for me, is all encompassing, and I throw a lot at what I do, and I enjoy that because I genuinely think that what we do is making a difference. But it does wear you out, and I've got a couple of things that I like to do, and to spend time away from work, disconnected. And I guess mobile phones are both a fantastic business tool, but also pretty average. So I try to go places where mobile phones don't work.
Okay.
And I'm lucky enough in that I enjoy being in the outside, and so I spend time in the outside, and I do things that that are just different from what I do at work. I mix with people who are different from what I do that I hang out with at work, and so that's really important to me. I actually find learning to be really, it's not relaxing, but because your mind is totally off what you do in your day-to-day work, I love actually like continuing education.
Okay.
And doing bits and pieces. And a couple of years ago I did a diploma in electrical engineering sort of after work and things like that. And I enjoy that stuff because it takes you away, keeps you busy, and it takes you away from work. And then ultimately I think that you also need to spend some time with your loved ones, either your family or partners or whatever. And so that's really important to me as well. And across the organisation, I'm keen for people to work hard, and I'm keen for them to put their shoulder to the wheel when it's required. Yeah. And pretty much everyone I work with, I know that's very much the case. But I want them to turn off their phones and to spend time with their families when they don't have to do that.
Do you ever try and catch people out?
No, I don't. They're grown-ups. I don't. I try not to look over people's shoulders and things like that.
Yeah.
I do get a report every now. I do get a couple of reports. Microsoft's a wonderful thing at looking over your shoulder.
Yeah.
That tells me people's log-on times and things like that. And I'll occasionally ask the manager what's happening. And I mean, at times people will have to work hard, but that shouldn't be all the time. And they should be making an opportunity when they work hard to recover from that.
So you've just come back from 3 months sabbatical. Yep. I'd love for you to share what was the thought process around it, how did it come about, but most importantly, what did you do with your time?
So I guess this is my first CEO gig, and our company has had quite a busy 5 years, and I have really thrown myself at that challenge, and it's been exciting, and I think we've done some good things along the way. There's still plenty to do, but I was just getting a bit tired, really. I was a bit grumpy, and I wasn't probably spending as much time with my family as I should. And we've got a great board, and I talked to my chairman about maybe that 5 years I was a bit tired, maybe I should do something different. Mm-hmm. And we explored that, and it wasn't that I wanted to do something different, it's just I wanted a good break.
Yep.
And so he said, well, why don't you take an extended break? And that was really good because I kind of think one of the biggest things you leave as a CEO is what happens after you're gone. Mm-hmm. And me being away for 3 months let me see that actually there's a fantastic team that I work with who carried on.
So I was going to ask you, what's the one thing that you learned about yourself, but what's also the one thing that you learned about maybe your senior team?
So the one thing I learned about the team was actually sometimes it goes better if I get out of the way. Uh-huh. And maybe this is the old alpha male view of a CEO. You kind of feel like you've got to be the biggest voice in the room and the chest thumping sort of alpha male effectively. But actually sometimes I think you get the best thing when you step back and let others lead the way. And I mean, I'm really fortunate in that we have a great executive team who are absolutely fantastic. And and they're great. I need to just get out of the way and let them do a good job a bit more often. And so in terms of my break, that was sort of one of the things I had a chance to sit back and think about a little more, is just the evolution of our business has been quite internally focused. Mm-hmm. We were really setting up how to make things work, how to do all the bits and pieces. And now we're coming to a time where those internal systems are much better, and my focus needs to transition to being more externally focused.
Yeah.
And so that's what I've come back to sort of, and it's not a big pivot, it's like 15 degrees. It's just like focusing a little bit more outwards and focusing on some of the opportunities that are in front of us and things like that. So that was great. You asked me before, what I did.
Yep.
And I'd love to say it was some grand tour. COVID kind of got in the way of
Right.
doing anything spectacular. But like I said, I enjoy the outdoors and I enjoy spending some time with my family. So my two boys, 16 and 17, and I, we went into the Kaimanawas for a few days and we camped out. We caught a helicopter and they haven't been in a helicopter before, so that was very exciting for them.
Yep.
We camped out and tried to shoot a deer, or scared a couple of deer and tried to catch some fish. We caught a few fish and just hung out in the bush for a few days, and so that was great. And we did some other trips with my family to different lakes. We like lakes. We're a big fan of Lake
Favourite
Taupo.
lake?
Oh, Lake Taupo is probably my favourite, but Tarawera is really good. And Waikaramana is fantastic actually over on the east coast. It's a fair way from anywhere, but it is a beautiful place, and I have spent some time over there. And then I spent 10 days at the end of the break with my two brothers, and we went down to Stewart Island and Fiordland, and we stayed on Stewart Island for a few days and did some diving. I was going to say hunting, but probably walking around, scaring the animals down there, and just had a good. And New Zealand is such a beautiful place. Actually, I do really need to make more of an effort to get out and about, because Fiordland. We spent a bit of time there. It's just big, Fiordland. You don't appreciate it, and it takes you so long to go anywhere. And Stewart Island is the first time to Stewart Island. Beautiful place. If you get a chance, get there.
I'd love to get your view and opinion. What for you is the difference between being a manager and being a leader?
And I mean, there's probably screeds of papers that have gone into this. And I think that really good managers are leaders, but you don't need to be a manager to be a leader.
Okay.
And I think that, and there's probably some academic definition somewhere, Adam, that you're able to find. But to me, leaders, you get people wanting to do things. Managers are telling people how to do things.
Okay.
And that might not be quite the right definition, but that's what I think. Leaders get people wanting to do things, managers tell them how to do things. And it's certainly like in our sort of organisation, we've got a lot of knowledge workers and highly skilled service people and things. They don't need you to tell them how to do it. They know how to do it. What they need is for you to help them to do it a little bit better, to coach them into doing things. Have you always done it that way? Is that the best way to do it? Have you thought about this? Rather than saying, turn bolt A 3/4 of an inch to the right. They know that stuff. They don't need people to tell them that.
Who's the leader in your life that's had real impact and influence on you?
It's probably early on in my career. I had a job for a few years, and I went and worked for a company called Deloitte Corporate Finance in Wellington, and there was a partner there, a guy by the name of Alan Dent. He was like in a partnership, and a sort of professional service partnership. A lot of people were kind of pushing themselves around, but I just really enjoyed that he was a very understated sort of leader. And one of the things he said to me, which has always stuck with me, is he said he loved employing bright people because they ask him questions that keep him learning. And so he was never looking to be the brightest, smartest person there. He was looking to be pushed by brighter and smarter people around him. I always really enjoyed that bit of him. And if I could do one other, I did a bit of work when I was at Deloitte, but I was seconded to a company that Graham Hart ran at the time. And I always, and he was sort of quite distant to me, just sort of junior, but I always appreciated that he was looking to buy an asset, and just before he puts the bid in, he gets everyone around the table and he goes around asking everyone what they think, and right down the back is this little junior analyst or something. I might have been a manager by that stage, but it's real junior on the deal. What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? And I was like, asked me what I thought about the deal. Now, I didn't add anything to his decision, but just the inclusion that created it was really quite profound for me, and I think that's really important.
So Paul, you've been in Taranaki for 17 years. What originally brought you here, and why have you stayed?
So I came through the traditional way that Taranaki recruits people from outside. I married a lady from Taranaki, and it seems as though that is the Taranaki sort of main immigration path. They send the young men and women out into the world, and they marry people and drag them back. And we were only coming for a bit.
Yep.
But I've been really fortunate in Taranaki is that I've actually had a variety of different roles that have been interesting and engaging, and have kept me interested, because that's the challenge. I love living here. It's a great place to live, but I still want to keep learning and growing. And if they're not the roles to do that, it gets a little bit less attractive, really. So that's always the challenge. And I've been really fortunate. The companies I've worked for have been absolutely fantastic.
So you mentioned this aspect of learning, because you've said it a number of times. How do you go out for formal learning? And then who's challenging your thoughts and your ideas and questioning you?
Yeah, and it gets harder. I must admit, it gets harder to find formal professional development that's kind of relevant and interesting. And I'm struggling with that at the moment. Actually, I'm a member of the Society of Accountants. I have to do some Institute of Directors. So I have to do some professional development time, and I could just go and tick some boxes. But I actually want to go forward, and so I am actually struggling to find courses at the moment. And COVID hasn't helped with the difficulty of travelling, and even some courses that I was on was cancelled. But I'm much more. I don't want to learn about the Health and Safety at Work Act and things like that. I want to learn about how you make people think differently and how you change how they behave and how you can influence people. And that's a much smaller and more difficult set of courses to find. So I'm working my way through trying to find something. And in terms of who challenges me and the like I said, I'm really fortunate the chairman of FirstGas at the moment, Mark Radcliffe, is a very experienced CEO and now chair. And so he's got a really good insight into what I'm good at, and maybe those areas that I need to work a little bit harder on, and the board also provide him, I guess, with some help in that. So he's really good. And then I'm fortunate in that amongst the people that I work with, we've got a great people and culture person who is really helpful to me, and she'll pull me aside and say, hey, look, maybe you need to work on this or that a little bit, and that's great. And she goes, maybe you need to work on this a little bit, and I think this will help you, or that'll help you, or the like. And we have a little bit of a sort of a thought school around our executive team where we're exchanging, I've read this, I think it's great, everyone should have a look at it, and we have a chat about it every now and again. Yeah. And that's quite cool. And we're sort of thinking about how we can do things a little differently amongst ourselves and get it to go a little bit better. It's quite organic, really. Yeah.
I'd love to know what you're most proud of in your professional career.
In my professional career, there's a few things I'm proud of. I'm really proud that people I work with have gone on to do better things. And there's a whole range of people across Taranaki and stuff, and not just in Taranaki, that I've worked with, and I'm not going to say I provided anything that's particularly informative to them, but maybe just a little polish here or there, and they've gone on and done great jobs. And it always, like I said before, I think that the most satisfying thing as a leader or a CEO or whatever of an organisation is what the people do after you leave. And so I've been proud. And so there's a few people that I have had very good careers, and I'm just hugely proud of that. And then again, and I guess a little bit at FirstGas, I'm really proud of the culture that we've created there. It's not perfect by any means, and it's still got bits that work on, and some people like bits of it and other people don't. But in the whole, I think it's just a great place to work, and certainly the feedback we receive mirrors that. And I'm hugely proud of that as well.
So there's this concept of leaders create leaders that then create leaders. And it takes 5 years to maybe become a leader, and then another 5 years to then get another leader. Who was the person that kind of saw something in you that helped you become the leader?
I've worked previously at Powerco, and I think on the Powerco executive team there's like 5 members that have gone off to become CEOs of different organisations, and most of those were kind of started at least by Richard Crowe. And so he sort of kicked that process off, and then Nigel Barber came on and kind of polished the rest of us up. And so, I should say there's 5 that become CEO, and one who wasn't on the executives become the mayor as well. But it was just a real talent factory for a while. It attracted people.
Did you feel it at the time when you were sat around the exec table? Did it feel special?
Oh, it did. It did feel special, and you just appreciate. I'm sure you've worked in organisations where people haven't quite pulled their weight or haven't done a good job, and you really appreciate actually how much better a place is when you've got a good person.
Mm-hmm.
And we were just really fortunate, sort of late in Richard's tenure and through Nigel's tenure, that it just felt like everyone was good. And a lot of the political sort of things that you hear about organisations just didn't exist. Everyone was kind of on the same page trying to do the best. Mm-hmm. And that I hope showed off in the performance of the company, but it certainly showed off in how well people have done subsequently.
Last couple of questions. What do you want to be known for? What's the legacy you want to leave behind?
I'm not a huge legacy person. I want to leave people able to go on and do better. Mm-hmm. That's what I want. And I guess probably if you say your legacy, it's like people. That's what I want to say. I want to leave people who are excited and engaged and wanting to step forward and make a difference.
Mm-hmm. And what's the one thing that you've not achieved that you want to achieve, business or personally?
I've got a lot of things that I still want to achieve business-wise.
Yeah.
And I still feel I've got a lot to learn. I'm still early in my time as a CEO, and I make plenty of mistakes, and I just want to keep learning and growing. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing that I'll put my finger on at the moment, but I just want to keep going.
Paul, thank you very much. I love your transparency, your honesty, your rawness, and this real thing that came through really clear was this aspect around people, about your development, but actually more importantly about the development of other people. So thank you for joining us. This is part of a series, the Leadership Lab. We hope that you've enjoyed it, and until next time, bye for now.